It's the week of Halloween, so we're going to continue with our spooky podcast episodes. So this one's called The Phantom Sprint, the invisible work that steals your velocity. Your sprint looks healthy until a phantom dependency eats your finish line. Here's how to find the invisible work before you actually get to the demo, which is incredibly important. So picture, if you will, you're moving through a sprint, everything's good, and at the last second, a vendor needed data from you in order to process something, and they didn't tell you about it until the very end, right? I see it all the time. We call it phantom work because it's always some type of external dependency or a stakeholder ad hoc ask or some production interruption or hotfix that comes in that sometimes isn't even really a hotfix, or hidden support work that no one accounted for that just needs to be done. There's so many different ways that you could define this phantom work or invisible work that steals away the team's velocity. So I think it's important for us to figure out the best way for us to determine how to prevent these things from interrupting. So one of the things is to keep the team focused, centralized on the work that they're doing, right? When necessary, create a dependency board. Use a visible Kanban lane for external asks with owners and ETAs and treat it like a Scrumban fashion, where you have an allocated amount of time for the things that you know are predictable to keep the lights on, and then you have an allocated percentage of your story points. And I shouldn't say a lot of amount of time. You have story points allocated to things that are known, that are going to be in the backlog, things that you know you have to do, things that are predictable. And then you have a set aside set of story points for the unknown things. Forget about time altogether. That's the whole point. Times were created as phantom stuff to begin with, right? And if you can put that together and you can understand how to manage these things and manage those expectations, you're going to be able to give them an ETA. Hey, we have our next technical debt sprint on this day. Or, hey, that was something critical enough to queue it up as a first item in the next sprint. Or, hey, that was critical enough for us to drop everything and get to it. So the interesting thing is if you're doing a Scrumban fashion, then you can take a certain, I don't want to call it a buffer, but a certain percentage of your story points and allocate them to ticketed work. And if the ticketed work doesn't come, the team can always move forward and get a head start on the first item in the next sprint. So I think that's important. But I think the other thing that's important and critical that no one likes to talk about is the preparation that goes into sprint planning, meaning that before sprint planning ever occurs, you should have that 1 hour a week refinement meeting where you're talking about things. I call it a pre-planning checkpoint, if you will, where you can break out a little checklist and do a readout with ops, with support, with other people to make sure that you're taking care of things so that they don't become a recurring interruption. You want to make sure you're taking care of the things that are critical, and you want to ask yourself those key questions. So what's causing this and what's going to prevent it from happening again? Another focus is something that is affectionately referred to as the hidden factory. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're doing things and then doing it again and again and again, right? You don't want to solve a problem and then find that you're solving the same problem again and then the same problem again and the same problem again. You want to make sure that you get it documented. One of the things that I like to talk about is a risk register. Now, I know that's very PMI, very project management professional, very PMP. But if you can put together a short public list of items that are blocking your sprint goals and make sure people know, or even if you could block your sprint goals, it might not be yet, but it's something that's a potential blocker. So maybe something like, before we commit, what external approvals, vendor deliveries, or support windows might touch this work and interrupt us? So you can make sure you're prepared for the known knowns and for the unknown unknowns, right? Because you want to make sure you have preparation for both of those. And I think that if you ask yourself, what invisible work has surprised your team in the past, and what did you do to overcome it? These are good questions because sometimes in a retrospective, you figure out that these things are happening, but you haven't gotten to the point where you figured out why they're happening or what you need to do to correct it. The other is, what simple ritual removed the most phantom tests? What was something that you did? My favorite is setting up a technical debt sprint where instead of having one person work on 10% of their time dedicated to that, you have an entire sprint dedicated so that people can get these things done during a sprint and the whole team can work together to tackle these things. So if you do those things, then you'll have a clear lane of everything that needs to be done. And you can do this by setting realistic expectations for every sprint that are outcome based. It's so important. If you get to the point where you're doing those things, that's going to help you do three key pieces. So the three key components are the three key takeaways for this whole thing. One, your goal is to make invisible work visible. You want to make sure you're showing people your cards and that everybody knows exactly what's going to happen. Two, you're protecting the team's velocity. And what I mean by that is don't let constant interruptions destroy or disrupt the team. Make sure you take care of those things and allocate them into a technical debt sprint if necessary. And then finally, three, find ways to own dependencies early, whether it's through a dependency board, a risk log, however you're trying to do it. Make sure you figure out the best way to do it that fits into your work culturally and matches up with the type of things that you're producing. If you do those things, that's going to help you really gain some traction and going to help the teams get the benefit of the result that they're looking for. And it's going to keep our stakeholders happy because we're on top of things instead of always falling behind. That's going to do it. Don't let those ghosts creep up in your backlog. If you've got something you want us to talk about, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care. Bye now.